welcome back to Prime Wealth. We're so glad you're joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Today, we're diving into something super important, emergency funds.
Right. It's one of those topics that might sound a bit boring at first, but trust me, it's crucial.
Absolutely. I mean, we all face unexpected expenses, right? Whether it's a car repair, medical bills, or just life-throwing curveballs.
Exactly. So in this episode, we're going to break down the Ultimate Emergency Fund Guide. We'll chat about how much you really need to save.
And why having that financial cushion is so vital, especially as we get older.
Yep. We'll also share some practical tips on how to build that fund without feeling overwhelmed.
And, we'll discuss common misconceptions about emergency funds that can really trip people up.
For sure. I think a lot of folks don't realize how much they actually need or how to get started.
Totally. By the end of this episode, you'll feel more confident about your emergency fund strategy.
So let's jump right in, shall we? First up, let's talk about how much you really should have in your emergency fund. So, Alex, let's dive into why having an emergency fund is, super important right now, especially for folks over 40.
Absolutely, Jordan. For many people in that age group, they're often at a pivotal point in their lives. Maybe kids are heading off to college, or they're looking at retirement on the horizon.
Yeah, and I think that can feel really overwhelming. I mean, just when you think you have a plan, life throws you a curveball, right?
Exactly. And it's not just the kids leaving home. Health issues can pop up, or unexpected repairs on the house. I mean, it's life, right?
Right, and I read a statistic recently that said nearly 40% of Americans would struggle to cover a $400 emergency. That's alarming.
It really is. And for someone over 40, that number can be even more concerning. You're often earning more, so you might think, I'm fine, but, life is unpredictable.
So true. I have a friend who, just last year, had to replace her entire roof. Just like that, she was hit with huge expense. If she hadn't had an emergency fund, that would have really stressed her out financially.
Yeah, and that's a great example. It's not just about having the money, it's about peace of mind. You want to feel secure in your financial decisions, especially as you approach retirement.
Right, and I think a lot of people don't realize how quickly those expenses can add up. A car repair here, a medical bill there. It's like death by 1,000 cuts sometimes,
Exactly. And the emotional toll can really weigh on you. When you're worried about money, it affects everything. Your health, your relationships, even your job performance.
Yeah, I mean, if you're stressed about finances, that can lead to sleepless nights, and then you're not at your best during the day, which can spiral into more issues.
And that's why having a solid emergency fund is so crucial. It really acts as a buffer, helping to absorb those shocks of life.
So how much do you think is enough for an emergency fund? I know there's a lot of debate around this.
Well, traditionally, the advice has been 3 to 6 months of living expenses. But honestly, for people over 40, I'd lean towards the higher end of that range. Maybe even more, depending on your specific situation.
That makes sense. I mean, as we age, our needs change. We might have more responsibilities, or perhaps we're caring for aging parents.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the job market. It can be unpredictable. If you lose your job in your 40s or 50s, it might take longer to find a new one.
Right. And if you're in a specialized field, it can be even tougher to bounce back. An emergency fund can really help bridge that gap.
Yes, it's like a safety net. And think about it. If you have that fund in place, you're more likely to make decisions that are right for you, not just the ones that are financially motivated.
Oh, totally. If you're not constantly stressed about money, you can think clearly about your next steps, whether that's a career change or, planning for a dream vacation.
And let's not forget the emotional aspect. Having that fund can really boost your confidence. It allows you to take risks, pursue opportunities, or even start a new venture without that constant worry.
Yeah, I love that. It's not just about financial security. It's about living your life to the fullest, having the freedom to make choices that align with your values.
Exactly. And the world we live in today is different from what it was 20 or 30 years ago. The economy can shift quickly, and job security isn't what it used to be.
You're right. And with, the rise of the gig economy, more people are freelancing or taking on side hustles, which can be great, but also unpredictable.
Yes. And that unpredictability can make it even more essential to have a cushion. You might have a good month, and then a not-so-good month. So having that emergency fund can help smooth out those ups and downs.
So it sounds like it's not just about saving money, but about creating a sense of stability, which is so important, especially as we age.
Absolutely, Jordan. And for those listening, it's really about taking proactive steps now, not waiting until something happens to think about it.
Right. And I feel like many people might be intimidated by the idea of building an emergency fund. It can feel like a daunting task.
It can seem overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. You can start small, set achievable goals, and build up gradually. Every little bit counts.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's about progress, not perfection. And once you see that fund grow, it really motivates you to keep going.
Exactly. And just knowing it's there, it can change your mindset completely. You're not living in fear, you're living with intention.
I love that. So, as we move into the next part of our discussion, let's talk about some practical strategies for building that emergency fund, because I think that's where a lot of people need guidance. So Alex, let's dive into this whole emergency fund thing. It seems like a lot of people aren't really sure how much they actually need.
Yeah, totally. It's one of those things that sounds simple but can get a bit tricky. The general rule of thumb is to have 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses saved up.
Right, but how do you even figure out what those living expenses are?
Good question. So the first step is to track your monthly expenses for, let's say, 3 to 6 months. You want to include everything: rent or mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, and even that morning coffee habit.
Oh, that adds up, huh?
For sure. And don't forget any debt payments like credit cards or loans. Once you've got a total for those months, you can kind of average it out.
So, okay, let's say my monthly expenses are around $3,000. What would that mean for my emergency fund?
If you're using the 3 to 6 month guideline, you'd be looking at a range of $9,000 to $18,000. That sounds like a lot, but it's really about creating a safety net.
And it's a lot less daunting if you break it down, right? If I aim to save a specific amount each month, it feels more manageable.
Exactly. You can set up automatic transfers to a separate savings account. Maybe start with $500 a month. In a year, you'd have $6,000. And that's a solid base.
I love that. And it's all about consistency. So what if, someone has a more unpredictable income? Say, a freelancer.
Great point. For freelancers, I usually recommend aiming for the 6-month cushion, maybe even more. The income can be up and down, so having that extra buffer really helps.
That makes sense. What about people who are closer to retirement? Should their emergency fund look different?
Yes, definitely. If you're nearing retirement, you might want a larger emergency fund, like 9 to 12 months, worth of expenses, just to account for any unexpected health costs or, market fluctuations.
Wow, that's a good strategy. And what about where to keep this emergency fund?
Right. You want it to be easily accessible, so a high-yield savings account is a good option. It gives you a bit of interest while still keeping your money liquid.
So not in the stock market or anything risky?
Exactly. You don't want to gamble with your emergency fund. It's all about safety and peace of mind,
Yeah, I totally get that. And speaking of peace of mind, how often should people be reviewing their emergency fund?
I'd say at least once a year. Life changes, expenses change. If you've, say, changed jobs or had a kid, you'll want to reassess.
Right, and if I realize my expenses have gone up, should I adjust my savings goal?
Absolutely. It's all about being proactive. If you find you need to save more, just adjust that monthly contribution accordingly.
That's a smart approach. But what if, you've got debts and you're thinking, should I be saving or paying those off first?
It's a balancing act, for sure. I usually recommend having at least a small emergency fund, maybe $1,000 to $2,000, before aggressively tackling debt. This way, you're not putting yourself in a tough spot if an unexpected expense pops up.
That's really practical. So it's like you need some cushion while working on those debt payments.
Exactly. And once you've got that small fund, you can focus on paying down your debt faster without the worry of, what if something happens?
So once you've got that emergency fund set up, what are some common pitfalls people should watch out for?
Oh, there are a few. One big one is using the emergency fund for non-emergencies. Like, a sale at your favorite store is not an emergency.
Haha, right. And I bet a lot of people can fall into that trap.
Totally. And another pitfall is not keeping the fund topped up. If you have to dip into it, make sure to refill it as soon as you can.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like keeping your safety net intact.
Exactly. And don't forget about inflation. If you've had your emergency fund sitting in a low-interest account for years, it might not stretch as far as it used to.
Wow, that's a good reminder. So staying informed and proactive is key.
Absolutely. And just remember that building an emergency fund is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes time, but every little bit counts.
I love that perspective. It's all about being prepared for whatever life throws at you.
Exactly, Jordan. With a solid emergency fund, you'll feel a lot more secure and ready to tackle anything that comes your way.
Thanks, Alex. This has been super helpful. I think our listeners will really appreciate these practical tips.
My pleasure. I hope everyone feels empowered to start or boost their emergency fund. It truly makes a difference.
Absolutely. And in our next segment, we'll dive into some of those common pitfalls people face when managing their emergency funds.
Sounds great. Let's tackle those.
All right, Alex, so we've talked a lot about the importance of having an emergency fund. But what about the common pitfalls people run into when trying to build one?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jordan. One of the biggest mistakes I see is underestimating how much money you actually need in that fund.
Right? I mean, it's easy to think, oh, I'll just throw a few $100 in there and I'll be fine.
Exactly. And then, when life throws a curveball, like, say, a medical emergency or unexpected car repairs, they realize that isn't nearly enough.
So what's a good rule of thumb for figuring out how much to set aside?
Well, a common recommendation is to aim for 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. But that can vary based on individual circumstances, right?
Totally. Like, if you're a freelancer, you might want to save even more because your income can be inconsistent.
Yes. And that brings me to another pitfall, not adjusting your emergency fund as your life changes.
Oh, for sure. Like, someone who just started a family might need a bigger cushion than they did when they were single.
Exactly. And I had a client, let's call him Tom, who had a solid emergency fund when he was single, but after getting married and having kids, he didn't reassess it.
Oof. What happened?
Well, he faced a major car repair, like thousands of dollars. His emergency fund only covered half of it, and he ended up having to rely on credit cards.
That's a slippery slope. So it sounds like keeping track of life changes is key.
Absolutely. And then there's the tendency to dip into the emergency fund for non-emergencies.
Haha, guilty. I mean, it's so tempting to use that money for a vacation or shopping, right?
Right. But that's not the purpose of the fund. It's for real emergencies. I had a client, Sarah, who treated her emergency fund like a savings account for her fun expenses.
Oh no! What happened with her?
Well, she ended up in a pinch when her roof started leaking during a storm. She had to scramble to cover the repair costs, and it was a real wake-up call for her.
Yikes. So how do people recognize when they're falling into that trap?
Great question. One sign is if you're constantly making excuses to take from that fund, or if you're feeling stressed about using it. If you're worrying about how to pay for something non-essential, that's a red flag.
I can see how that could happen. It's like a slippery slope, and before you know it, your safety net is gone.
Exactly. And don't forget about the importance of keeping that fund accessible, but not too accessible.
Right. Like, if it's too easy to access, it might be too tempting. But if it's locked away, it could be hard to get when you actually need it.
Yes, a balance is crucial. I recommend a high-yield savings account. It's a good way to earn a little interest, but still have quick access when needed.
That makes sense. So what's another common mistake you see?
Well, another pitfall is not having a plan for what constitutes an emergency.
Oh, that's interesting. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Some people might think that any unexpected expense qualifies, but not every surprise is an emergency. Like a last-minute concert ticket? Not an emergency.
Haha, right. So how do you define what's truly an emergency?
It often comes down to necessity versus want. If it impacts your ability to pay rent or buy groceries, that might be an emergency. But if it's just something that would be nice to do, it's probably not.
Ooh, that's a helpful distinction. So what would you recommend for someone who's trying to reset their emergency fund after making these common mistakes?
Well, first, take a good hard look at your current expenses and life situation. Then set a realistic goal for your fund based on that assessment.
And maybe start small, right? Like, if you can't save 3 to 6 months right away, aim for 1 month and build from there.
Exactly. Celebrate those small victories. And remember to revisit and adjust your fund regularly as your life changes.
I love that. So it's all about being proactive, not reactive.
Yes. And one last thing. Don't be afraid to seek help. Talking to a financial advisor can provide clarity and keep you on track.
That's such a good point. It's okay to ask for guidance.
Absolutely. And remember, building an emergency fund is a journey, not a race.
Well said, Alex. So what's next for our listeners?
I'd say the next steps are to assess your current savings, set realistic goals, and just start saving. You've got this.
Yeah, and remember, even small contributions add up over time. Thanks for the insights today, Alex.
Always a pleasure, Jordan.
All right, folks, stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll dive into budgeting tips for those unexpected expenses. All right, so let's dive into the next steps and tools that our listeners can use right away to start building that emergency fund.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it can feel a bit overwhelming, but breaking it down into manageable steps makes a big difference.
Right, so what's the first thing folks should do?
Well, first things first, let's start with a checklist, yeah? I always recommend determining your monthly expenses. That's kind of the foundation.
Oh, for sure. So, like, calculating how much you need to cover your essentials, right?
Exactly. You know, things like rent or mortgage, utilities, groceries. It's important to know your baseline.
And then, how about setting a target amount for the emergency fund?
Yes, a good rule of thumb is to aim for 3 to 6 months worth of those essential expenses. But if that feels too daunting, start with just 1 month, right?
I love that. It makes it feel way more achievable.
Definitely. And then, once you've got that number, you can break it down into smaller monthly savings goals.
Oh, yeah. So, like, if your monthly expenses are $3,000, you'd aim for, what, $9,000 to $18,000 total?
Exactly. And if you break that down into, say, a year, you'd need to save about $750 to $1, $500 a month, which is totally doable if you plan for it.
And speaking of planning, what tools or apps do you recommend to help folks track their savings?
There are some great options out there. You know, apps like Mint or YNAB, You Need a Budget, are fantastic for budgeting and tracking expenses.
Oh, right. I've heard of YNAB. It's super popular. What's the appeal?
Well, YNAB helps you assign every dollar a job, which really encourages mindful spending. Plus, it's got that community support aspect, which can be motivating.
That's a great point. And what about simple savings accounts?
Good catch. A high-yield savings account is a smart choice for your emergency fund. They typically offer better interest rates than traditional accounts, so your money can grow a bit while it's sitting there.
Yeah, and if folks are looking to start small, what's a realistic way to kick things off?
Even setting aside $10 or $20 a week can add up over time. You'd be surprised how quickly that builds.
Totally. And I think that helps people feel like they're making progress without feeling overwhelmed, you know?
Exactly. And, you know, if you get a bonus at work or a tax refund, consider putting that lump sum directly into your emergency fund.
Oh, that's smart. It's like a little boost in your savings, right?
Yeah. And remember, it's all about creating good habits. Automating your savings is one of the best ways to do that.
Oh, I love automation. Just set it and forget it, right?
Yes. You can set up automatic transfers from your checking to your savings account each payday. It makes it so much easier to stay consistent.
And consistency is key. So what about books or resources for our listeners to check out?
There are some great reads out there. I'd recommend The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. It's practical and really motivational.
Oh, I've heard of that one. It's a classic for a reason, right?
Yeah, for sure. And another good one is Your Money or Your Life by Vicki Robin and Joe Dominguez. It's more about mindset and your relationship with money, which is super helpful.
I love that. Shifting your mindset can make such a difference.
Absolutely. And encourage listeners to talk about their goals with, friends or family. Accountability can keep you on track.
That's a great tip. It's always nice to have support when you're working towards something.
Definitely. And remember, it's okay to start small. Every little bit counts, and the important part is just getting started.
Right. So to recap, figure out your monthly expenses, set a realistic target, use budgeting apps, automate your savings, and maybe read a couple of those books.
Exactly. And just keep building those good habits. Over time, you'll see your emergency fund grow, and that peace of mind is priceless.
Well said, Alex. I think our listeners are going to feel so much more empowered after this conversation.
I hope so. It's all about taking those first steps and knowing you're not alone in this journey.
Yeah, for sure. So let's transition to wrapping things up for today.
Sounds good?
Wow, Alex, that was a lot of great information on emergency funds. I feel like I learned so much.
Yeah, for sure. So let's recap some of the key takeaways, right?
Absolutely. So first off, we talked about how having an emergency fund can really provide peace of mind. It's like a safety net for those unexpected life events.
Exactly. And we mentioned aiming for 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. It sounds daunting, but breaking it down makes it more manageable.
And don't forget the importance of keeping that fund accessible, like in a high-yield savings account. You want to be able to grab it quickly if you need it.
Right. And we also covered how to start small. Even if it's just setting aside a little each month, it really adds up over time.
Yeah, every little bit counts. And remember, it's okay to adjust your goals as your situation changes. Flexibility is key.
Absolutely. So for anyone listening, I hope you feel empowered to take those first steps toward building your emergency fund. You've got this.
Definitely. And if you found this episode helpful, please like and subscribe. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below, especially if you have someone in your life who's 40 plus. Share this with them.
And don't forget, next time we'll be diving into something really interesting. 10 common money mistakes beginners make and how to fix them.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. It's going to be super informative.
Thanks for joining us today, everyone. Remember, your financial journey is just that, a journey.
Exactly. We're here to support you every step of the way. Until next time, take care and keep thriving.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.